Coming to you live from Georgia and from Brazil, it's the Matt L Podcast. Our next guest is my eighth grade English and social studies teacher, Mr. Samuel McKibben. How have you been, Mr. McKibben?
Pretty good, pretty good. Still overseas teaching. I have a lot more gray hair than when you last saw me. But no, we've let's see, since we were in Beijing
Mhm.
with you and your family, we went to Bolivia
Okay.
and then we went back to Jakarta, Indonesia, because we
Mhm.
lived in Indonesia twice.
Yeah.
Then we went to West Africa to Ivory Coast,
Yeah.
and then now here in Recife, Brazil, and this is our last post.
Yeah. Um, let's get right into it. I was going to ask you whether you were in for some ready for some questions, but so I
Sure.
remember in eighth grade in 1999, 2000, you had a mustache.
I actually had a mustache until about, I'd say, a couple of weeks ago, and
Wow.
I had a goatee and everything. And I decided to let everything grow out a little bit and shave it all one length.
Mm.
But once again, everything's gray now. So a little bit of a change.
So in 2017, I grew a goatee like I had.
Yep.
And then in 2019, I went back to being clean shaven. And then the following
Yep.
year in 2020, because of COVID, I grew it back.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah.
got really, it got my goatee part really got really like thick. And now, so now
Okay.
I keep it trimmed.
Yep, yep, I know. So,
So you've kind of talked about where you've lived since we lived in Beijing. Um, So you said you went back to Jakarta, Indonesia, so you must really like it there.
we originally we the first time we were in Indonesia, we were in Surabaya, which is the second largest city on Java, and that's where we were there 8 years, and that's where our kids were born,
Wow.
our two daughters, and then we had the chance after Bolivia to go to Jakarta because we had a friend that was director there at GIS, and it a fantastic school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably different than ISB Beijing, which was a fantastic school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say more suited to my style of teaching would be Jakarta.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you were in Beijing, very academic and very driven, focused on academics. Jakarta was kind of like a mix of academic yet social emotional, and that
Mm.
suited my teaching style much better. So we
And
stayed 10 years.
as we've seen with young people with like mental health issues today, these days, like that is so important, that social and emotional component.
Exactly. Yes, and too many people have overlooked that for years. So,
I remember that when I was in your eighth grade for English and social studies, you have two daughters. Jasmina was in kindergarten and Cayenne was even
mhm,
younger than that. Have they graduated from college?
correct.
Has Jasmina graduated from college and or is Cayenne still in college?
Okay, well, it this is a good example of time flies and you lose track of it. Jazz is 28
Wow.
and Kai is 25. They both
Wow.
graduated from university, and because we were in Jakarta, they got really good scholarships based on the school and the opportunities that that school gave them.
Mhm.
Um, Jazz is working for the University of Florida in Gainesville. Just bought her first house, so she's
Wow.
learning the ins and outs of being a homeowner. And Kai is living in Maui,
Mm,
and this past summer got engaged to a guy that we really really love very much. So they're both doing very well.
good.
And
Yeah.
for asking.
Yes, I have a girlfriend now, and I'm probably going to propose to her in March or April. We looked at rings
Oh,
yesterday, so
oh
I
wow.
know I can relate to Cayenne.
Okay, that's fantastic. Congratulations in advance. Let me
Thank
know.
you.
Let me know how it goes.
Thank you. And I thought I was going to be single forever, to the point where I was setting up my single guy friends. Like, well, maybe if I can't find someone, maybe I can set them up.
Yeah, there's always somebody out there for you.
Yeah.
You have to wait, and it has to happen naturally.
Speaking of which, how did you and Mrs. Sherry McKibben meet each other?
Okay, it was my first overseas post,
Ah,
and I took a job in El Salvador, of all places, during the Civil War. Didn't quite
wow.
know what I was getting into. And we were both new teachers going in. And I actually met her. I had arrived like on, I don't know, like maybe a Thursday, and she arrived on a Friday. And the director had tried to like connect us before we even came, because I had to
Mhm.
go to New York City for my visa, and she lived in New York City. Long
Okay.
story short, she never returned any of my phone calls. And when she tells a story, she's like, I'll meet that guy when I get there. And I literally met her at the airport because the director said, he goes, you got to come with me tomorrow. You have to meet this woman. You really like her.
Wow.
And met, and 11 months later, we were married.
It sounds like the director really liked you. And I remember that my dad was a middle school principal in Barrington, Rhode
Mm-hmm.
Island, and my mom was an elementary school principal in
Okay.
at the same school. And so they worked together, but that's
Uh,
how they met.
yep.
Excuse me.
Yep. Yep. I think a lot of teaching couples meet at school.
Hmm. If I were single, I'd be looking around. There are some, there are attractive teachers, female teachers everywhere in every school.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way,
This
speaking
is
of,
true.
yeah, yeah, um, I'm working as an instructional paraprofessional now with middle
Okay.
school students with special needs. They're like on the autism spectrum. And
Okay.
ironically, Mr. McKibben, like I don't know whether you remember this or not, but I was not good at math when I was in school. And also the
Mm-hmm.
math
Mm-hmm.
was kind of very hard, as you said, mentioned like at ISB, the International School of Beijing, it was very academically rigorous. And so I
Correct.
had a
Yes.
tutor, but now irony of ironies, now the teacher I work with is a math and science teacher. Never in a million years would have thought, I'd be working with kids in math.
Yeah. Wow. Good for you. That's fantastic.
But so
So,
my next step is going to be a co-teacher, and
okay.
then I would love to be a teacher. And I just want to thank you because you're one of the teachers who inspired me.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
also because my parents work in education, I always wondered in the back of my mind, like what it might be like to be a teacher.
Yeah, it's a very rewarding experience. Although I will say this, I'm after like 36, 37 years of being in the classroom, I'm ready to not be in the classroom.
Mhm.
So, but I still have a few more years to go.
So what would you be doing if you weren't teaching, or would you retire?
Well, okay, my goal is at 65, I'm retired. We have a house in southwestern Pennsylvania, very close to three ski resorts, which were just purchased by Vail, which I'm very happy about.
Mm,
And I could see getting like a part-time job or a seasonal job in some capacity, work 20, 25 hours a week just to keep in contact with people, and, um, you know, just to have something to do as well. Not that there's a lack of things to do when you own a home,
mm,
but I think it would be a fun thing to still have, you know, interactions among, a wide variety of people. So, and ski resorts get a quite a wide clientele. A lot of the
yeah.
people that come up there on the weekends are coming from DC.
Okay.
So, it'd be a mixed group of people.
You mentioned that I think Jasmina, did you say Jasmina or Cayenne was born in Surabaya, Indonesia?
They were both born when we lived in Surabaya. Technically, Jazz was born at a little Baptist missionary hospital in central Java in a little tiny city called Kadiri. And
Kadiri.
there was an American OBGYN there, a Baptist missionary woman, and she delivered Jazz. Kai, on the other hand, was born at a brand new Australian-funded international hospital in Surabaya. So, and both the bottom line was this: both places gave us the ability to have a natural childbirth, as opposed to a scheduled cesarean, which was very popular with many of the Chinese Indonesian doctors that we would go to. And all of a sudden they would be like, well, nope, you have to have a cesarean. And it just the way it is there. It's culturally, and a lot of women pick the day that they have it because it's a positive, auspicious day, and
Yeah.
in belief. Anyways, and that's not what we wanted.
So your daughters are, I remember you talking about when I was in eighth grade in your class, three CKs, third culture kids, like,
Yep.
and I was
Yeah.
too, like growing up overseas, and we didn't know any differently, you know?
Yeah. Well, you are. It's you don't lose that. That gives you the new perspective on the world.
Um, so
I think we froze there a little
yeah,
bit.
but you're good. You're
Right.
good. We're good. How did you end up in Brazil, and where in Brazil are you? Are you in Brasilia?
No, no, no. We okay.
Recife,
Well,
right?
yes, it's almost as far. If you look at a map, Brazil, it's a very big country, but we are almost as far east as you can be on the South American continent.
Mhm.
Technically, I'm closer to West Africa than I am to Florida. Um, and we're just, I want to say north. No, we're just south of the equator,
Mhm.
so it's beautiful here all the time. And this is their summer. This is the dry season. So it's probably the average daytime temperature is like 85 to 90, and there's always a breeze. But to answer your question, we were in West Africa in Ivory Coast for 3 years,
Mhm.
and we both said this is our last post. This is it. And we said let's end up in Latin America because we've worked here before and we like the lifestyle. And this school wasn't even on our radar, but the director contacted us and we really liked what he had to say and the direction he wanted to go in. So we were offered the jobs and accepted, and very happy here.
So what does Mrs. McKibben do at the school?
She's a she's excuse me, a middle school, high school English teacher, and I'm a full-time middle school social studies teacher.
All right. So does she like teaching middle school students? Because I remember at ISB, she taught high school students.
Yeah, she's one of the few teachers I know that can do either. Um, she's done the high-powered IB. She's done all that. In West Africa, she was, super high-powered IB teacher, English teacher. But and she's at the end of her career, and she's like, you know what? I think I want to get out of the pressure of that, and just be with middle school kids and teach them how to write and how to
Yeah.
read and analyze. So she's pretty happy in middle school and
Good.
doing maybe like grade 10 high school.
Yeah. I have heard that like it's very hard for elementary school paraprofessionals. Like they have a hard time
Okay.
working with elementary students with special needs. But even
Uh-huh.
before I had heard that, I wanted to work with middle school or high school students anyway, or with
Okay.
older students.
Yeah, I'm a middle school teacher. I had to teach high school a little bit here and there, and I actually did not enjoy it. I
Yeah.
don't really I just I don't have the academic push, that is really needed for that.
Mhm.
I think that there are other things that sometimes are as or more important, that you deal with in a classroom, and it's not
Yeah,
always what you learn in a book
exactly.
or on a computer these days.
I remember my parents' first international position was in Peru when I was in third and fourth grade.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. Yep.
And then Shanghai, China, and then Beijing for a year, Sydney, Australia, and then back to China. And my parents and sister actually got to live in the Congo
Oh, wow.
For my dad was there for 2 years, and my mom and my sister were there for a year. So I got to
Oh,
visit.
wow.
I remember I was a freshman in college, and I got to visit them, and it's like a whole nother world there.
Yes, yes, yes. Yep. West Africa, it's very different. So,
So, if you would, please tell us about your students in Brazil. How do they compare to ISB students?
um, okay, they don't. They do and they don't. I think kids are kids around the world. It doesn't matter. But um, in at ISB and with the population of parents and students that were there, one, as a teacher, you're highly respected. Two, you don't even have to motivate kids for the most part to work hard and to try to um, achieve their best. If anything, you have to kind of like say, enough's enough. You know, take the weekend and enjoy your family. No homework.
Mm,
Um, Here, it is quite the opposite. Kids won't do homework. They are not focused on school, and I'm generalizing.
yeah.
You know, there are kids who are very academic, but for the most part, these are um, fairly wealthy Brazilian families, and a lot of these kids are just going to step right into their parents' business, and the parents, a good many of the parents, they don't even care about the grades.
Mm,
So it kind of sends a message to the kid, well, why should I? All I have to do is get a D, and that's enough. So as a teacher, especially a teacher coming out of 23 years in Asia, that's kind of like an adjustment that you have to make, that the kids are not going to be pushing themselves and I'm generalizing, because there are those kids that will. Um, but it's a different mindset. It's a different approach to education. Um, Now, having said that, it's very easy to have very close relationships with your kids here,
mm,
and they want that. The kids here need to feel like one, you like them and they like you, and
mhm.
if you can achieve that, then things go more smoothly in the classroom, because otherwise behavior will be a major issue.
Yeah.
Um, so it's an adjustment. So I think I've made that adjustment a bit more smoothly than Mrs. McKibben,
Okay.
because she's still more of a high school teacher in some
Yeah.
ways. But anyways, it is what it is, and you have to accept the reality of where you are.
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick break and grab some water, but before
Sure.
I go, I remember my parents were offered positions in Rio de Janeiro,
Okay. Yep.
and I kind of saw that the students were very laid back and
Mhm.
like so there was like this computer science teacher. I was there for a tour, so I sat
Mhm.
in on the classes, and they had IB there, International Baccalaureate there as well.
Right. Right.
But like, so the teacher was kind of like strict, and he was going over the rules, and when his back was turned, one of the girls gave him the middle finger.
Yep. Yep. I
So
could I could see that happening.
yeah, and also like I'm a little better with it now because now here in the States, as you know, piercings are more prevalent, more common. But that back then I
Right.
saw like Brazilian young people with like tattoos, and
Yes.
I saw a lot of graffiti in the city in Rio. And
Yep.
so back then in that during that time of my life, I was like, ugh, when I saw piercings. And still am, but
Mhm.
to a lesser degree now.
Yes. Yes. Well, here, like it's unusual to see someone that does not have a tattoo, and I'm talking, okay, from like 18 up until as old as you could possibly be. And piercings are popular here. um, I see that all the time. Not with the students,
Hmm.
but once they turn 18 and are on their own, then I more and more of them will go down that road. But it's very, very common. We have teachers with nose piercings, all different kinds of piercings, and it's just accepted that it's fine. And you can wear blue jeans to work here. I wear blue
Yeah, and
jeans
not
every
just on
day,
Fridays, right?
every single day. And the funny thing was, when I came here, I didn't own a pair of jeans, and the local teachers hounded me for months. They're like, "You're ruining it for us because you dress up." And they're like, "You need to wear jeans." So I went to the mall and bought two pair of jeans, and now I wear jeans every day. So it's
All
just
right,
it's fun. It's a different culture.
I'm gonna grab some water and I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, so when we were at the International School of Beijing,
Hmm.
before they moved to the nice new state-of-the-art facility, we were
Hmm.
in what was called modulars,
Yes.
which would it be a fair description to describe them as kind of like mobile home, like but non like immovable mobile home trailers?
Yes. 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 They were two-story. I remember, I want to say I worked on the second story, um, if my memory is correct.
I think we were
Um,
on the first floor. I think Mrs. Kibler was on, for
ah,
example, one of the other eighth grade science teachers was
yeah,
on the second floor. I
yeah,
think
you are.
you and Mrs. Ortman and Mrs. Treffs were all on the first floor.
Yes, you're correct. Yes, yes. Yeah, they were definitely modular, um, like fancy trailers. I think that would have been used like on construction sites normally. But everyone used to say these are temporarily permanent.
What did you think about the state-of-the-art facility that the school moved into, which I got to visit? Because when I was in ninth grade, I was only
Mhm.
there for a year, but then we moved to Sydney, Australia, and I came back
Right.
over the winter break to visit ISB in the new, no, it wasn't in the new facility. They were still in the modulars the following year. But I think so. I played sports when I was in I lived in Xiamen, China in 11th and
Mhm.
12th grade. And I
Uh,
remember I came back to visit probably in when I was in 11th grade for a sports
okay.
tournament. And like ISB had moved into the new state-of-the-art building. What did you think
Right.
about the that new building?
And it was phenomenal. I was definitely on the second floor in that building. It just it just the design was incredible.
Hmm.
And just you never had to go outside, like, as opposed to at the old campus where it was, in the winter. You know what it's like in the winter in
Oh
Beijing.
yeah.
If you had to go to the office, you had to put on a heavy jacket and a hat and gloves.
Hmm.
And but it was super, super facility. And Mr. Dulac actually asked me to build a climbing wall.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it was an Olympic, um, what would you say, Olympic grade climbing wall. And we got a really good deal on it because that was the year that Beijing was going to, or was right before Beijing was going to host the Olympics.
Yeah. So it was right
And
before
the
2008.
Yeah, and the company that got the contract to build climbing walls for the Olympics, because it was going to be like I think a demo sport then at the Olympics. Um, he said, "I will give you guys an incredible deal. Let me build an Olympic, state-of-the-art Olympic wall for you, but it's in reality, it's helping us prepare for what we need to do." And then I was able to teach climbing as an elective,
Yeah.
which was a blast. So it's the only class I've ever taught in all of the years of teaching where kids ran to class.
Yeah. I
So
remember we had a climbing wall on the old campus with the modulars. Um,
yes,
and you taught a leadership elective, and one of the components of that was rock climbing.
yes, correct, correct. Yep,
That's
I forgot
awesome though.
about that.
So it was even obviously it was even bigger and nicer than the climbing wall at the on the campus with the modulars, the old campus.
Yeah, this was a professional wall, not a homemade, home built wall. It was one of the they when I left, it was one of the things that I was sad to be leaving.
Have like athletes and Olympic athletes like gotten a lot of use out of it?
I honestly I couldn't tell you that. So when I was there, it was only for us. And at night, like 2 nights a week, teachers could come and I would run like a nighttime climbing session for adults.
That's awesome. All right. So important questions.
Sure.
Just big picture, what do you think of? I know I had you for social studies when I was in eighth grade. What do you think about what's going on in the world right now, specifically with like Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia? I actually got to go on a trip to Israel in May.
Yeah, I actually saw that. I on Facebook I saw you posted some of your pictures. Um, okay, I think it's easy to go down the rabbit hole and say everything's falling apart. But I think that it's always been this way.
Hmm.
We see it now live on TV or live on the internet. It's in your face constantly. It's part of the news cycle.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think that both of those situations are extremely volatile and dangerous. As Ukraine, I I I I I don't know enough about the long term history of it, but I don't think, in my opinion, Russia has no right to invade a country like that.
I agree. And it
Um,
had been like many years before a world leader had openly just like invaded a country before Putin did that.
yes. So in reality, I see him as a dictator.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and and I don't understand in my own country how there are populations of people who think that he's a great leader.
Oh yeah.
Um, which I just I can't get my head around that. But I feel for um, both sides who are dying in that situation. Russian soldiers just being thrown to slaughter, um, and Ukraine, fighting for its independence. I really think that the NATO and the U.S. we need to support that country, and I would like to see NATO or Ukraine become part of NATO.
Mhm.
Um, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the president or of Hungary is blocking that currently.
Mm.
I believe that's what I've read. Um, on a different along those lines, we interviewed to go to Kiev when we interviewed to come here, and thank God we did not get those jobs
Yeah.
because we have friends that were working there and they got evac'd and they've lost everything. They just basically had to pack one suitcase and leave the country.
Yeah.
And they left everything behind. It's gone. And the school has permanently closed that they were at. So, but yeah, what a tragedy. Horrible.
I mean,
Um, Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to switch to Israel and Palestine.
Yes.
What a complicated situation.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not an expert on all of the history, but I will say this: both sides have committed, in my mind, atrocities, and I believe that both sides have legitimate claim too. You can't be attacked by a terrorist group and accept it. At the same time, you can't oppress people for forever and not expect them to say enough is enough. Because I think many Palestinians, especially the youth, this is my opinion, um, if you put people in a situation, especially a group of young people, and they have nothing to lose, then they have nothing to lose, and I think that's a very dangerous place to put people in. I would love to see, for years I've always thought, this needs to be resolved, but at the same time I question, do the powers that be really want a resolution?
Exactly.
So it's so complicated, and I have kids in my class here who are Jewish, and they've asked me, what's your opinion? And I said, well, this is very complicated, you know and kind of skirted the discussion.
Sure.
um,
But it's a
but then
they're
one kid
complex
said,
issues.
yeah, and I said we can study it if you want, and all of us learn more about it. I said, one, I don't I don't have enough information. But the interesting thing was one of the seventh grade girls said, what side are you on? And I said, I'm not on any side. I'm on hoping that some way, someday, this could be resolved and both groups could live side by side. They're not
Yeah.
going to disappear. And both groups live prosperously.
Yeah.
So but that's horrific. It's like what I see and read. I'm shaking my head. I can't imagine um, what is going on there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very sad.
I so the bad news usually gets the press, you know,
Yes, yes, of
and
course.
we don't always hear the good news. And
Yeah,
but one thing I remember, like just like from day one, from the first day in your class, you know, you were always like you wrote in big letters, "Be nice" on the board,
yes,
and
I
you
still do that.
always preached kindness. And kind of reminds me of my dad. He always says at the end of the day, be kind to people, you know,
Yes, yeah, yeah. Treat people how you want to be treated.
the golden rule.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, do you remember Amelina Majid? I think she was in Mr. Pellant's homeroom
I
or Mrs. Treff's
remember
homeroom.
the name. I'd have to see a picture, but I do remember the name.
I didn't hear from her in time for the interview, but she worked for the United Nations at one point, so I was interested to kind of like hear about her experiences working for the UN and whether she made a difference, you know.
Right,
So,
right. Wow. Huh.
okay, what do you think about what's going on in the United States, you know, with our own government? And, you know, we're going into 2024, and that's going to be a big general election. You're already shaking your
It's
head. Yeah.
politics in the U.S. is it's ridiculous.
Ooh.
Um, I okay. One, I I remember the day where okay, you were a Republican or a Democrat, or you could be an independent. And if you were independent and there was an independent candidate, you knew they were going to lose.
Yeah.
Okay, it was just the was. But I remember Republicans and Democrats. Okay, you'd vote for your candidate, I'd vote for mine. But when it was over, it was over,
Yeah.
and there wasn't this fighting along the way and division. Um, it's like right now, I really like when I read the news, I watch clips. When I go home in the summer, the negativity that is put out there on a daily, constant level um, is shocking to me, and the lies that people believe and the conspiracies. And I really think that this is all a large part due to the internet.
Hmm.
That people they accept what is said or they're shown, and it could be even fake,
Yeah. Fake
and they
news.
don't question it. I just, anyways, I give you my real quick rundown. Okay, I'm not a Republican,
Yeah, I
but
know.
I would, I mean, if Chris Christie or Nikki Haley got the nomination, I would be perfect fine with that, and I could be fine with either of them being president.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. But
on
not
the
Trump.
Democratic side, never in a million years.
Because I will
The
say,
man's a charlatan. He's a
I I'm
dangerous
not,
person.
I will say that, you know, and it wasn't just him. Obviously, he had an administration. Like, I'm not the biggest Trump fan.
Sure,
I do have to say, in
sure.
fairness, he has done good things for our country. So has Biden. But I do think like the tone of politics shifted in 2016 when he ran for
Yes,
president.
yes,
That it kind of took
yes.
on a mean tone.
Yes, I
And
agree.
and he never concedes when he loses. Everyone else, all the others, they'll concede if they lose. He doesn't. I'm gonna run to the bathroom, Mr. McKibben, and
Sure,
if we get cut
sure.
off because I only have 40 minutes for my Zoom, we'll just log back
Okay,
in, okay? I'll be
okay,
right
all
back.
right, okay.
So yeah, I'm kind of hoping that like Ron DeSantis gets the Republican nomination. I think it's going to be
Mhm.
Trump and Biden again, but um there's also a young, like my age, a guy with an Indian last name who starts with
Oh,
um a V. I think his name is like Ramaswamy or something.
yes, yes, I'm aware of him.
And
I don't
maybe
know
I
enough. I don't know much about
yeah. And yeah, but and he's like my age. But
him.
so what is like the Brazilian government like? Do you have any insight into what the Brazilian government is like?
Okay, last year they had elections. Um, Prior to that, they had um, the guy who was president's last name was Bolsonaro, um, and he was referred to. Well, he was good friends with Trump. I'll just put it that way. Anyways, he ran against a former president named Lula,
Lula.
and anyways, Lula, you know, at one point was thrown into jail for corruption allegations, but it was overturned and let out.
Mhm.
And he's much more liberal, less conservative. Anyways, he was reelected, um, and I can't remember the margin, but it was a pretty clear, difference. So right now, well, everyone was worried that the country was going to go into a bit of a tailspin, but it didn't,
Mhm.
which is great. And the economy didn't really fluctuate much because people were saying if Lula gets in power, the economy is going to die, and it hasn't.